It's hard to imagine that not so long ago, a job and a career were two sides of the same coin. Let me put it this way. If LinkedIn was around back then, most people's career timelines would look just about the same. You'd start out at one company, and if all goes well, steadily rise the ranks until you're handed that classic gold HMT watch at your retirement party 30 or 40 years later. But now, I think you'll agree that things could not be more different. Thanks to AI, economic disruptions, mass layoffs, and a bunch of other fun things, the 40-year career is no longer something you can take for granted. And that fundamentally changes the nature of our careers. Now, here's the thing, no one embodies that change more than the Gen Z workforce.
Right now, people are not looking at a company as a place to make a career, but just a place to get a job, to get a paycheck, to get something you can add to your CV and then jump to the next best opportunity, right?
That's my colleague Debanjali Biswas. She covers careers and workplaces for the Ken and is a Gen Z employee herself. She spoke to HR professionals, recruiters, and employees to understand this shift better. What caused it? And more importantly, how are companies dealing with it?
So, what this means for companies is that aside from caring about your typical metrics like your revenue and your profit, they also need to care about something that earlier was taken for granted. They took for granted the fact that if you are in a company, you will have people to work for the company. But now that's not a constant anymore. So, companies have to care a lot more, very actively care about employee engagement, employee retention, making sure that they find value in what they're doing, right?
Now, that's a massive switch up for organizations in India, particularly legacy companies like the Tata Consultancy Services or the Hindustan Unilevers of the world, where up until not so long ago, it was the company that dictated the terms. You didn't negotiate with the institution, you simply retired from it. But today, the tables have turned. Debanjali spoke to a management trainee at Larsen and Toubro who was ready to quit after just 9 months in the job because the 10 lakh CTC just didn't work for him anymore. He claimed that of the nearly 50 trainees who joined with him, one-fifth had already quit and several more are planning to. Now, whether or not that was entirely accurate information, this isn't just an L&T issue. Murli Santhanam, the Chief Human Resources Officer at Ascent HR Technologies, put it quite nicely. He said young employees are now seeking a job, not a career.
When you are a young professional in this space and you're at one job, one role, doing one kind of work for years on end, you are bound to feel stuck, and no one wants to feel that. They want to move around. So, as a result, people want to grow, but not necessarily within a company from point A to point B, slow and steady, but they want to grow in skills and competencies. They want to grow personally, internally, so that they can get better opportunities faster.
Now, companies like Godrej, HUL, and L&T are trying to arrest that trend. And the best way to do that is to get the memo and align with the sentiments of younger employees. Welcome to Daybreak, a business podcast from the Ken. I'm your host Rahel Philippos, and I don't chase the news cycle. Instead, every day of the week, my colleague Snigdha Sharma and I will come to you with one business story that is worth understanding and worth your time. Today is Tuesday, the 6th of May. There was once a time when getting accepted to a management trainee program was the ultimate way to kickstart your career. Yet, today, only about 30 to 40% of those future leaders actually continue in the program beyond the first couple years. The thing is, 2 years into these programs, and young employees feel like they are ready to take on the world.
At the base of all of this is ambition. People are just a lot more ambitious right now. The desire to grow, but not just grow, but grow quickly, is a lot more important.
Now, employees in some ways are calling the shots. They are setting expectations for their employers to meet. For instance, HUL hires 15 to 20 management trainees every year to mold them into future leaders. But in the last few years, the company started seeing an increase in what they called infant attrition.
So infant attrition is basically you join a company and you don't even make it a year, right? Like you quit within the first year. You leave before you've even had time to make a place for yourself in the company, get to know anyone in the company.
An HR professional from HUL explained that the end goal for these management trainees mostly is to become a brand manager. But the part to getting there is not so easy.
It's a grueling 6 to 8 year process where the first 2 to 4 years is spent in sales or sales adjacent things. So the first 2 years during your training, you have to go to rural areas, you have to live in tier 2, tier 3 towns, you need to work with vendor partners on the ground. You are not going to get that cushy life of working out of a fancy MNC building in a tier 1 city, have access to great food and theaters around you, right? And that is not the lifestyle they want. So that expectation breaks because in their mind, they are thinking long term, I'm going to be a brand manager and I'm going to have a team of 100 under me. But in the short term, they don't realize that they have to go through the sales process, which is not something they care about.
Now, for most of us, voluntarily escaping the comfort of a steady job so soon is probably terrifying to even think about. So, I was curious to understand what was making these Gen Z employees so fearless.
All of this comes from this feeling of I have a safety net. Because if you look at young professionals in urban India, a lot of them come from dual income households. They come from a background where their parents have saved up over the years and they can now afford to move around, quit their jobs because they're not going to be out on the streets if they are without a job for a couple of months, right? And along with all of this, of course, there is the presence of social media, social pressure. Every time you see a LinkedIn post with someone saying, uh, I'm very glad to announce that I have moved to this new role, it adds to a sense of what am I doing if I haven't changed jobs in a couple of years? You know, am I stuck? Am I losing out? Am I not good enough to get these promotions and these job changes?
Sure, not everyone has that safety net, but some of the young trainees Debanjali spoke to said they still had more of a cushion than their parents. It's that cushion, that safety net, that allows some of them to even accept a pay cut to prepare for a bigger forward leap. But the thing is, while they make these ambitious leaps and sidesteps, it's companies that very often end up paying.
One of the HR executives I spoke to, Murali Santhanam at Ascent HR, he gave me his personal formula of sorts, right? Which accounts for not just the recruitment, training, onboarding cost, but also the entire cost of an employee leaving and there being this vacuum in a team, right? So all of that combined, for younger level employees, the cost is about one fourth of their uh, annual salary or the amount that is paid to them annually, that pay package rather. For mid level employees, it can be half, as high as half of their entire pay package. And for senior level executives, it is the highest because that is where the stakes are the most. These are the brains of the companies in a way. So, there, if an executive leaves, the cost to company there becomes almost 9 months to 12 months worth of uh, their annual pay package, which is a huge amount, right?
And it isn't just monetary. Think about the impact this has on things like team dynamics, client relationships. Timelines end up getting delayed.
Then sometimes if there's a very influential manager handling a team and that manager decides to shift to a different company, they'll often bring their team with them because they have a synergy of working together. So then what happens to that project or the tasks that that team was doing, right? That project and task gets stalled. So there are those kinds of additional resource, time, and monetary costs attached to it.
You can't build a legacy on shaky talent. So these companies have to find ways to either retain talent or make peace with the rate of attrition.
So for retention, you obviously have the very basic things that have been happening for a while. You have offering better pay, very basic tactic. You offer better working conditions, which means you allow people to relocate to different cities to be closer to families. That's what a lot of companies like Bajaj talked about, something they prioritize to keep company culture up. Uh, it also might be relocation across the world, right? Because people aspire to go abroad, live abroad, get better pay. So a lot of MNCs, large companies that have presences globally, allow that as well.
Some companies are also offering their employees more flexibility to work remotely. A management trainee Debanjali spoke to from Axis Bank said working in the banking team is very stressful. But the fact that it offers a solid hybrid policy means she's able to manage her professional and personal commitments with relative ease.
And then, of course, aside from these obvious things, you also have the very structure of orgs flexing, they can't be as rigid anymore. So they have to get rid of that. I mean, when you think of rigid organizations, very set in its ways, very established, HUL comes to mind. They have a very, very structured program for management trainees entering. The career progress is laid out minutely over the next 6 to 8 years, and there's a very clear way in which you go from point A to point B. But even within these very rigid structures, change is coming about, in baby steps, of course, because so the brand manager I spoke to, they said that they were one of the few people to ever skip the sales route, the part that causes infant attrition, because people don't want to deal with the unglamorous lifestyle of sales without before going to marketing.
Like Debanjali mentioned, these companies have realized that rigid structures just don't work anymore. So if a manager sees potential in an employee, they are okay to let them skip a few rungs of the ladder now.
Earlier succession planning was very simply, okay, this person exists, they have potential to be a leader for us in the future, let's just keep an eye on them. But now it's not enough to just identify these people, you also have to make sure that they're engaged, that they are staying, and they're learning exactly what they need to do to become the successors, the leaders, which means that it's not about pinpointing the person but also putting them in different roles, actively mapping out an entire career trajectory for them. Someone, you might want to put them in the head office to learn strategy, and then you might want to move them to a different team to learn finance.
As a result, you see a lot of younger people entering CXO levels very early on. Board members are younger, CEOs and COOs are younger, all because companies are trying to create more opportunities for growth. A decade ago, interns meeting the CEOs and talking to them over a cup of coffee was never heard of. Now, thanks to people-centric policies like L&T's Chai Pe Charcha and Bajaj Finance's regular reviews with employees, they end up feeling seen. All things considered, however, while the industry is having long-term conversations about changing older systems and culture, the rate of change is still slow. Unless management can find a balance between urgency and importance, employees will drain themselves working, talent managers will continue hunting for eternity, and companies will become history in a few years.
Daybreak is produced from the newsroom of The Ken, India's first subscriber-focused business news platform. What you're listening to is just a small sample of our subscriber-only offerings. A full subscription unlocks daily long-form feature stories, newsletters, and podcast extras. Head to theken.com and click on the red subscribe button on the top of the website. Today's episode was hosted by Rahil Philippos, produced by me, Snigdha Sharma, and edited by Rajiv CN.